through the documents that have been prepared for national reporting, for the compliance, and also for the implementation and compliance committee. With that, I see we have our slides projected, and here just some housekeeping notes as per usual. Many of you are regular attendees, so I'm sure you are quite aware of them, but may I simply draw your attention to the fact that it would be terrific if you could record your questions in the chat function. Feel free to ask as we go along, and here and there where we can, we shall try to weave an answer into our presentation, or otherwise, please be assured we also have info stops at specific moments to take questions relevant to that. And of course, there's also time foreseen at the end for any other matters regarding these two agenda items that may be helpful for parties and stakeholder preparation towards COP 4.2. With that, and also with the note that we are recording this session, as there may be some officials at the UNEA and other such meetings happening concurrently. And so we know that that will hopefully be helpful for them as well. But to start, you have before you here the tentative schedule of work that is being put forward for COP 4.2. COP 4.2, of course, opens on the 21st of March and is to conclude on Friday, the 25th of March. And on the Tuesday, it is foreseen that the documents that we will be introducing today in a little bit more detail and the agenda items specific to national reporting and the Implementation and Compliance Committee would be open. That is on Tuesday morning. And here, these two items are being proposed to be presented, and we have structured our presentation this way here as well as in the regional meetings and also in the document briefings earlier this month, because the work of the Implementation and Compliance Committee is very much related to the most recent short reports, to the first set of short reports that have come in, which is of course the main part of the COP's concern under the article national reporting. But before we go there, let me also, of course, say that there's draft reporting guidance also before the COP, but we will go step by step through the next slides. So with that, let me begin just to give the overview that all our work, all the work on the Minamata Convention under these articles is firstly, of course, under Article 21, which is the obligation of parties to report. And then also there is Article 15, through which the Implementation and Compliance Committee has been established. And projected here, you see, of course, the actual text of the convention in terms of national obligation to report, but also the intent of the convention to be able to review this implementation and compliance through a committee, which is a subsidiary body of the COP. May I also draw your attention to the fact that for reporting, at its first meeting, the COP passed or adopted Decision 1.8 on the timing and the format of the national reports. I'm quite sure you're well aware of them, but we shall, of course, delve into that more as we go through the next slides. The format consists of parts A to E. If I could go back to the last slide, the previous slide, please. Format consists of parts A to E, and parties would report on 4 of those questions on a 2-year cycle and the full reporting format on a 4-year cycle. And for the Implementation and Compliance Committee, I'd just like to highlight here that the committee would examine both individual and systemic issues, and its task is based on its examination if it needs to make recommendations to the COP. And further, the committee may consider issues on the basis of written submissions by parties, or national reports in accordance with Article 21, or requests from the COP. And for our session today and for this agenda item now, it is of course because the committee has been looking at the national reports that have come in, that they are being presented together. Next slide, please. Here, just to map these two streams of work against the agenda item that are being opened at COP 4.2. The entire item is on matters for consideration and action, and under there we have under H the matter of reporting, and under G the matter of the Implementation and Compliance Committee. So outlined here are in broad sweeps the three tasks ahead or in front of COP4. So let me take you through it, and we will do so in detail, of course, in the next slides. But firstly, there is the regular periodic COP task of reviewing the national reports that have come in. The national reports are the first short national reports for the cycle 16th August 2017 to 31st December 2018, and it is for the reports that were submitted by December 19. And for this, we will be taking you, if you have not already, gone through document 416. And just to say, we have also begun, as from this year, to put together INF2, which is information, overview of all the information parties are providing to the Secretariat, which is also part of overall implementation information, so that the COP may be fully informed on all of the very helpful information parties are providing. And you will notice that it is a REV because we have already put this information forward for 4.1. But in the meantime, more parties have ratified, more MIAs have been completed, more national reports have come in, etc., etc. And so we would like to update you on the good progress that has been made in this regard through that revision. Let me take you to the next task, which is that, of course, COP3. There was a mandate through decision 313 for the Secretariat to draft guidance for filling out the full reporting format. This draft guidance is in front of the COP in document 417. And then let me take you to the other side of the slide, which is the work specific under the Implementation and Compliance Committee. Here, of course, whenever the Compliance Committee meets, it prepares a report for the COP, and so it is the COP's task to consider the regular report of the ICC to it. And this time around, and that is, of course, document 415, and this time around, in this period, especially the task of reviewing the short reports was a focus of the work of the ICC. And so we will be delving into that a little bit more. Also because the ICC made specific recommendations based on its review of the short reports. With that as background, to the next slide, please. And here, this is hopefully going to be a timeline that will be helpful to you because it is important to keep track of what happens when and how in many ways to get the big picture. So I'd like to introduce to you the Secretariat Implementation Review timeline. You will see here that, of course, in terms of implementation review for the convention, it all starts on the 16th of August 2017. That is the date of entry into force of the convention and for its first 51 parties. We are very happy to have received so many ratifications since, of course. COP1, as you will recall, was in 2017. We had the first 3 COPs on an annual basis, so 1, 2, and 3. And now we have switched to a biannual basis with COP4 in November of last year, 2021. And due to COVID circumstances, the second part will be convening in the next 27 days in Bali. Let me also just identify here that I've put a small icon where the ICC met. The ICC has met 3 times so far in the respective intersessional periods. In other words, ICC 1 was between COP 1 and 2, ICC 2 between COP 2 and 3, and then, of course, ICC 3, the one that really delved into the short reports, took place between COP 3 and 4. For your information, as part of the work of the Secretariat, based on the reports that have come in, the Secretariat prepares a report to the ICC, which it considers. And over and above that, the Secretariat also prepares a report of the COP. So that report can take also information on board that could be considered even after the ICC, in which case, and you will see this at times, we had a number of more reports come in to an overall reporting rate of 89% of parties to the convention. Let me also just quickly draw attention to the big golden arrows, just to clarify the reporting periods of our reports. The short reports, the first reporting period is from entry into force until the 31st of December 2018. And parties then have a year to compile their information to submit it by the 31st of December 2019. The first full reports also start, the 4-year cycle also starts at the entry into force, which was the 16th of August, but goes for longer in terms of its reporting time, and that is until December 2020. And then again, parties had a year to put together their information and to be finally submitted by the 31st of December 2021. And from this, it follows that, of course, the next reporting periods will be able to do the full 2-year cycle and the full 4-year cycles, because they'll start on the 1st of January of 2021 and then move through all the way to 2024 for the 4-year cycle. With this all as background, but we can return to any of this, of course, if you have any specific questions. The focus of all the work intersessionally has been simply on the first short reports. This timeline is just to give you the bigger picture of what is still ahead. And just as teaser, I will also be able to give you our first information on the first full reports that have been handed in by parties. But with that, to the next slide, please. We have structured our presentation in these 3 streams. In other words, taking the tasks before the COP and putting against that the information contained in the documents. And so first, this task by the COP of reviewing the short reports, of course, that's document 416. We will speak to you shortly about, Richard will introduce to you the reporting obligation and the reporting performance, and then take you through the review of the responses to the 4 questions. And then there'll also be a small info stop in case to give you an overview or a back view of all of that again. Then we will move to the ICC. Firstly, Lara will introduce to you the report of the ICC, but also, as mentioned, since the bulk of the work was short reports, also she will introduce to you the ICC recommendations. We will again have an info stop, of course, there as well. And then thirdly, is before the COP, the draft guidance. This is document 417. And I will introduce to you the mandate given, the process to have developed the draft guidance, the structure of the draft guidance, and there'll also be an info stop. Perhaps this is the document many of you know best, because we have realized that you have used it in your full reports. But nonetheless, we will spend a little bit of time on that just to give you the mega overview, or in case you need to pass that on to any of your colleagues for their preparation. And with that, to the next slide, and may I ask Richard, please, to take it out from here.
Thank you, Claudia. Good day and good evening, everyone. Welcome to this session. I'll be starting out with an introduction on item 4H and national reporting. As you will note, the agenda on national reporting has 3 documents, but I'll be focusing at least on this section, and particularly on the next couple of slides, on document 4/16, national reporting, as well as document inf/2, Rev 1, on information provided by the parties to the Minamata Convention. On document 4/16, you will note that this document provides the Secretariat's report on the first short reports, as well as the responses to the questions and feedback received from parties on parts C, D, and E. The document also contains the overall observations of the Secretariat. And then, as I've noted, the document should be read in conjunction with the INF2 Rev 1 document. Note that both documents elaborate on the reporting performance of the first short national reports covering the period 16 August 2017 up to 31 December 2018. Next slide, please. On this slide, you will note before you is an overview of the reporting format as prescribed in decision MC 1/8 with parts A to E. And as you will note in highlight are the relevant articles covered under the first short national report. As mentioned, again, the report covers the reporting period for the first short national report starts at the entry into force of the convention until December 31, 2018, with the subsequent report submission on 31 December 2019. Next slide, please. On this slide, you will see a breakdown of the reporting performance that Claudia mentioned earlier, 89%, broken down as follows: 63 parties submitting as of the 31 December 29 deadline, and an additional 39 parties submitting by the 30 June 2021 deadline. 8 reports are still to be received. 4 parties submitted incomplete reports, and 2 parties voluntarily submitted their report. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, document 4/16 also covers the 4 questions that are in the short reports, which relate to the following: the existence of primary mines operating in the party's territory, individual stocks and sources, the consent for the export of mercury, and finally, the 4th question on 11.2, the final disposal of waste consisting of mercury and mercury compounds. In the next couple of slides, I will walk you through the responses of parties, as well as the Secretariat comments on the responses. For the next slide, please. Now, these the responses can be found in Annex 2 of 4/16, which presents the details of each of the responses, to the 4 questions. Now, on question 3.1, the diagram to your left on whether a party had operating mercury mines within their territory, 2 parties reported to have mines, while 100 parties responded no. On question 3.3 to your right, on whether parties had endeavored to identify stocks and sources, 45 parties responded yes, and 57 parties responded no. Of the 45 that endeavored to identify stocks and sources, 32 attached their results. Next slide, please. On this slide, you will note 2 questions, 3.5 and 11.1. At the top is question 3.5 on whether parties have sought consent to export mercury. 94 responded no. Note currently that the format does not allow party to indicate that it does not trade in mercury. And 8 parties indicated that they trade in mercury and that they had sought consent. In the diagram below on 11.2, on whether parties have facilities for final disposal of mercury, 75 responded no, while 20 responded yes, and 2 responded that they do not know. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of going a little deeper into the details of some of the responses, to remind you on what question 3.1 is, does the party have any primary mercury mines that were operating within its territory at the date of entry into force of the convention for the party? So the party has an option of answering yes or no, and then additional information to follow afterwards. I'd like to draw your attention to the table on the right. You can find this table in Annex 2 of document 4/16. The table elaborates on how the parties responded to question 3.1. The table also shows the table below the table below also shows additional information from two parties, namely Indonesia and Mexico. Now, we do acknowledge that the text is very small, but these tables are being presented here to highlight that they're there in Annex 2. In Annex 2 4/16, and we do invite you to look more closely at your leisure on the detailed responses in Annex 2. Now, after reviewing the responses, the Secretariat notes that it may not be possible to deduce the total amount of mercury mined per year during the reporting period. As one party reported the amount of ore containing mercury, reported the amount of ore containing mercury that had been mined. Please refer to COP 4/16, the document 4/16, paragraphs B and paragraph 335A for more details on the Secretariat comments on the responses. Next slide, please. On question 3.3, has the party endeavored to identify individual stocks of mercury or mercury compounds exceeding 50 metric tons and sources of mercury supply generating stocks exceeding 10 metric tons per year that are allocated within its territory? Again, drawing your attention to the table to the right of your screen, you will note the breakdown of the party's response to the question. And again, the table can be found in Annex 2 of 4/16. For this question, and as you will note in document 4/16, the Secretariat has a number of comments, and you may find these comments from paragraphs 20A to F and paragraph 36. From the responses that's been received, it is not clear what the status of the remainder of the endeavors are. Are they ongoing, or the party has yet to report on the results? On the basis of these responses, the Secretariat notes that there may be uncertainty among parties as to whether the endeavor to identify stocks and sources is a one-time obligation, a continuing commitment, or a time-bound commitment. Again, I'd like to invite you to look at COP document 4/16, paragraph 20E and paragraph 35B and paragraph 36 for a detailed discussion on the responses. Next slide, please. On question 3.5, on whether has the party received consent or relied on a general notification of consent in accordance with Article 3, including any required certification from importing non-parties for all exports of mercury from the party's territory in the reporting period. Similar to the previous slides, I would like to draw your attention to the table on your right, which will elaborate and will show you the breakdown of how the parties responded to question 3.5. At the table below, the smaller table also shows the destination of exported mercury as per information provided in the reports. These tables can be found in Annex 2 of documents 4/16. Now, the Secretariat has a number of comments as well to question 3.5. I invite you to look at specific paragraphs 24A to I, document 4/16, including paragraphs 37 to 38. We will not be able to discuss all of these comments, but I would like to mention a couple to highlight some of the Secretariat response. For question 3.5, it's been noted that there should be a possibility to answer not applicable or no export to describe a situation where there is no export from that party. See COP 4/16, paragraph 35C for this specific comment. We've also noted that there are parties that submitted supplemental information in their report. However, it is not clear to the Secretariat whether the information provided satisfies the relevant requirements of paragraph 6 of Article 3. The specific observation comment can be found in paragraph 25 of document 4/16. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now moving on to the final question in the short report on 11.2 on the final disposal of waste. The question goes, are there facilities for final disposal of waste consisting of mercury or mercury compounds in the party's territory? Drawing again your attention to the tables on the right of your screen, you will note the breakdown of how parties responded to the question, plus additional information from parties on the amount of waste subject to final disposal and other information in the two boxes below. Again, the table can be found in Annex 2 of document 4/16. Now, you can also see the Secretariat comments in paragraphs 28A to C and paragraph 29 in document 4/16. Now, couple of notes on the responses to 11.2. That first, the question only relates to waste consisting of mercury or mercury compounds. The Secretariat notes that some responses were referring to wastes containing mercury or contaminated with mercury. From the answers provided, it cannot be said with certainty that all parties that responded yes did in fact have facilities for final disposal. And another issue that did come up, which the Secretariat has noted, the term final disposal was interpreted in various ways by parties in their responses in the report. Next slide, please. Now, in sum, when you look at the overall comments, when you look at all the overall responses, the Secretariat has observed that the wording of some questions resulted in a lack of clarity in the responses, and that it would be desirable if these issues would be addressed by the COP, particularly in question 3.1, the basis of reporting for the total amount, in question 3.3, on whether it's a one-off or an ongoing effort, in question 3.5, the possibility of indicating in the format that a party did not export mercury, and lastly, in question 11.2, greater clarity regarding the term final disposal. With that, I would pause and hand the mic over to my colleague Claudia, who will walk you through the next slides. Claudia, the mic is yours. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Richard. Perhaps the text is too small for you to see, but it is in the document 4/16 because there is an annex with a draft decision. And also attached to that draft decision is an appendix. And many of the items that you have heard Richard lay out in terms of perhaps observations of some items that may or may not have been clear, or perhaps an additional box is needed for parties to indicate that they do not trade in mercury, and therefore the need to seek consent they would like to note separately, as opposed to simply saying that they have not sought consent, which might be misunderstood. All of this is also, if you would look carefully at the proposed way forward in the appendix, how in places the Secretariat is perhaps trying to support your consideration as parties of perhaps how to move forward. There are also some items that may need a bit more reflection. It's more complicated than adding a box where perhaps a box was omitted. And so I'd just like to draw your attention specifically, of course, to Annex 1, the draft decision, but also the appendix to that decision. And with that, arriving at the last slide on this, the info stop. So that's the next slide. May I just sum up that we, of course, have been looking at the short reports that have come in at the end of 2019, but for the reporting period that ended the end of 18. And that it is therefore now before the COP through this document to conduct its review of these reports and just of the status of obligations of parties. You will have noticed a very high rate of reporting, which is very, very good indeed. And then there are some comments where there are perhaps some issues where some clarification may be considered, and it's laid out in the document and also in these slides. And may I just add, of course, we will send these slides afterwards in case they are helpful to you or your colleagues. And then, as mentioned, there is the annex, which contains the draft decision, and in broad terms, to commend parties for the high reporting rate, to encourage parties to again achieve a very high rate in the full reports and the subsequent cycles, of course, but also that where the COP sees it necessary, there may be some clarification that it may wish to consider, including as identified through the different paragraphs in the different report and through the text provided for parties' consideration. With that, may I just briefly stop here before we delve into ICC, and just to check if there is a question from the virtual room in the chat on any aspect you'd like to have clarified or that you may have seen in document 416 before we progress. So if you give me a moment to look if there is a particular question coming up. Or any particular, as we go along, of course, if another question comes up, please feel free to return to it, and we will again have some time at the end of it as well. Then I will say, let's go to the next chapter of our deep dive today, and that is the work of the ICC. And here it's my great pleasure to hand over to Lara Ognibena, our Program and Legal Officer, of course, of the consideration for the item of COP consideration of the ICC report and its recommendations. Please, Lara, over to you.
Thank you very much, Claudia. On the slide, you see item 4G on implementation and compliance committee, with the relevant document being 4/15 Rev 1, a report on the work of the Implementation and Compliance Committee of the Minamata Convention on Mercury. The document contains a report of the work of the committee. The committee met online from 7 to 8 June 2021, and the report of the meeting is contained in the annex to the document. So during the meeting, the ICC for the first time examined issues related to the implementation of and compliance with provisions of the convention based on the short national reports submitted by parties in accordance with Article 21. At the time of the meeting, the reporting rate was 85%. And therefore, the ICC commended that 97 out of 114 parties had submitted their reports. The Secretariat, during the meeting, also presented to the committee its findings on the responses submitted by parties for the short reports. And based on the report of the Secretariat and the committee's deliberation, the committee agreed on recommendations to COP4 on national reporting. In addition to national reporting, the ICC also considered issues related to its work program between COP4 and COP5. It also considered the venue and date of the next meetings of the ICC, which are scheduled to be held online, the first one, so ICC 4 in July 2022, and an in-person ICC 5 in March 2023. And a highlight of the meeting is also the election of Ms. Paulina Riquelme from Chile as a chair and of Ms. Itsuki Kuroda from Japan as vice chair and rapporteur of the committee to serve for their next term. Next slide, please. Here you see on the right side of the slide the recommendations that were sent to the Conference of the Parties for its consideration. While the reporting rates was very high, the committee noted that the following factors may have contributed to challenges on reporting. And here is the list that is also contained in the document. So parties may have interpreted reporting requirements in varying ways. Secondly, parties were still in the process of putting measures in place or progress was underway or ongoing at the time of reporting. Then some documentation did not reach the Secretariat, thus how to address parties' possible concerns regarding the protection of confidential commercial in confidence information. And finally, this was the first experience of reporting on Minamata obligations, and therefore there is a learning curve also in this respect. As I mentioned, you can see here the recommendations that are also included in the document 4/15 Rev 1. I would like to just add a small note. The Secretariat issued a revision to this document a few weeks ago. This is because in relation to a request of the committee during its second meeting to the Secretariat to request the National Focal Point of Thailand to clarify its notification with respect to information on the quantities and countries of origin of mercury imported from non-parties. At the time of the meeting, the Secretariat informed the members of the committee that no response was received from the Focal Point of Thailand. However, after the publication of this report, the Secretariat was alerted in January 2022 that Thailand had shared some information in response to the request made by the committee at its second meeting. And that information will therefore be taken up at the fourth meeting of the committee. So this additional information is now contained in a footnote of the document at page 4, and therefore the revision. I will stop here. Thank you very much. And I will hand over to Claudia.
Thank you, Lara. We just do a small info stop here again, literally just to recount that it is, of course, the COP that considers the regular reports of the ICC. And as mentioned now in the intersessional period, one of the main tasks of the ICC was to look at the short reports. And so you have the deliberations of that available in the report, as well as the committee's recommendations going forward. And just to highlight here that the recommendations welcome that the higher reporting rate would also put forward to remind parties of the importance of the reporting obligation, and also to consider the factors that may have contributed to some of the challenges on reporting. And then with regard to this item of perhaps not all documentation is reaching the Secretariat with regard to consent forms, to request the Secretariat to look into this issue and perhaps propose potential ways forward in this regard. As Lara outlined, there may be, it was indicated informally, there may be in some cases a worry of confidential information, and so we should have a look at it. That is the recommendation. May I also just draw your attention to the smaller box on this slide, just because the committee's deliberations were very, very considered and very step by step. And so I just wanted to alert, of course, but you will have seen it in the report, that the committee took, of course, its mandate as being a facilitative organ for implementation and compliance very seriously. And so there is in the report the recount of the mandate of the ICC. Also, the committee requested the Secretariat for active follow-up on any outstanding matters, which of course the Secretariat is happy to do to ensure all reports are complete as far as possible with the information, even if in some places information may not yet be ready to be reported on, but measures may already be in place. But may I also point to the point that the committee also looked at its role vis-à-vis the role of the COP, and specifically here it is about the interpretation of reporting requirements. And so the ICC is very aware of its role, but that decisions of reporting obligations are at the level of the COP. If I may leave it here for a moment and just look into the virtual room. If we have any questions coming up, please feel free to record them or let us know in some other way if there's something for clarification. If not, we should move on to the final chapter, which is the part of the other task before the COP, which is to consider the draft guidance on national reporting. And as I outlined already, this is, or as I indicated at the beginning already, this is document 417, and the mandate for this work comes from decision 313. The mandate said to provide guidance for completing the national reporting format, with the recognition that for the need for complete and consistent national reporting. And so it was based on this background that the Secretariat was requested to prepare draft guidance, which according to that decision was to be shared with parties for their comment and feedback. And this indeed happened earlier in 21. The draft guidance was shared, and many parties took the opportunity to send comments in writing. Very helpful comments, I must add, from the Secretariat's perspective. And we hope we have done justice to the comments. I also want to add that one stakeholder provided comments. And this then commented on and adjusted version was put forward as document 417, and it also, as the decision encouraged parties to use it on a provisional, invited the conference of the party invited parties to use it on a provisional basis for the reports that were due at the end of last year. And as I mentioned, we can see in the reports, but also in comments during the reports, that the guidance was used, both in terms of comments where it was helpful, and perhaps also at times there were some comments of where something could be better clarified or better set out. With that as background, let me go to the next slide. Just as mentioned, it is probably a document many of you know very well, but just to say it is set out in 3 sections. The first simply to give the background on reporting obligations and also the information on the online reporting tool. This time around, we launched the fully fledged online reporting tool, I can tell you a little bit more about that for the full reports. But of course, for the short reports, we had a pilot version online reporting tool, but also for that, just as an information, almost every party used the online tools to hand in their reports. In the second section is an overview of how the guidance has been put together. As you know, the reporting format consists of parts A to E, and it is in part B that there is a difference between the short and the full reports, because the short reports is about 4 questions in part B, while the long reports encompass all 43 questions. There's also a comment, a note as decided by the COP that which information is mandatory, that indeed reporting is it's a mandatory obligation, but there are also a limited number of questions that are labeled supplemental, where parties are very much encouraged to provide the information, but it is not mandatory to provide it. May I also just highlight here that, of course, reporting format of Minamata has been designed to allow parties also to reflect on and as far as they can report on the effectiveness of their measures at the national level. And may I just say here that this is, of course, a completely separate question from the overall effectiveness evaluation that the convention may do at a global level over certain periods of time according to Article 22. But let me close that bracket here and just go on just to say that Section 2 also has a small area where there's some practical comments on how best to approach national reports. And then Section 3 is really the guidance, the draft guidance. It is over 30 pages long, and it details what to put into each part. And then also it goes question by question of all the questions in part B to firstly give in almost all questions some notes and then a suggested way forward. And just to note that we have transposed the national reporting format into the online reporting tool. There are, of course, we hope that has worked out for parties, but we also realize, of course, that there are a couple of tweaks that we can make for the next reporting period. But let me go to the next slide, just to say that the draft guidance also includes, and you will now hear me sounding like Richard and Lara, because I'm coming up again in the reporting guidance with some of the items that we see both in the national reports that we see through the deliberations of the ICC and also through the drafting of the national reporting guidance, but also the commenting of other parties on the draft guidance, which is that there may need to be a bit more clarity on question 3.1, on 3.3 and 3.5. These are three of the questions, and to this list we probably could also add 11.2, in other words, the 4 questions that are part of the short reports. And if I could go to the next slide, just to stop here for a moment and to say that when this mandate was given by the COP3, this was before Corona, and we had expected to meet in November 2021 in Bali. Now we meet in another 28 days. But of course, we have also in the meantime, at the end of last year, received full national reports. And so this is also a very helpful input to understanding the state of implementation and also the obligation, how parties have dealt with their obligation to report. So with that, the way forward on the draft guidance, while the suggested note that you see there, and I've just included the text there that also includes that there are some clarifications that the COP may wish to consider. These are similar clarifications or same items as also coming simply forward from the short reports, but those clarifications, should the COP do so, would also then, of course, be helpful to put into the draft guidance so that it is clear for the next set of short reports that are due at the end, that are due, in fact, before COP5 is tentatively set to meet. And with that, let me just also, we have also here put the link to the original decision, and just to recount that that decision encouraged parties to use the draft guidance on a provisional basis, and also to request the Secretary to make it available for consideration and possible adoption. But as a comment from the Secretariat, it may also make sense that in the further approach to the draft guidance, what we can learn and see from the currently received full national reports may be very helpful as well in the further journey of the draft guidance. If I may look if there is a particular question that has come through the virtual room. I don't believe I see one. Then I would like to go to the next slide, in fact, to give you, while this is not part of COP4 deliberations, I would like to give you an update on the status of the full reports received. In other words, the reports that were received at the end of last year and that relate to the reporting period, the full reporting period that is from entry into force until the end of 2020. And we are extremely impressed as Secretariat to say we have to date, by yesterday, received 73 reports, 73% of parties that are to be reporting for this reporting cycle. We have received 73% of reports and are extremely impressed with the hard work parties have put into this endeavor. There are still some outstanding, and we are in direct contact with the relevant focal points. You will also see projected here that there are some that are almost finished, or there are some items that we are checking in on, so they are marked in progress. And then we have a slither of some where we do not see yet any or much activity on the online reporting system or through any other communication to us, which includes the paper-based version that's also made available. So we are specifically following up with those parties that have somehow not yet been able to submit their report. Perhaps they have prepared it, but it simply has not reached us yet. And this just is update to where the status is, so you basically know as we live it as Secretariat. And just for your overall information, what happens and what happens next on national reports is simply that once reports come in, the first stage of what we do is to check for completeness. And as this is a very thorough and deep report, it does take a bit of time to go through it to check that it can be considered complete. Sometimes some parties may have already received a note from Richard about some items, perhaps a link doesn't work anymore, or some attachment wasn't attached, and many have already responded to that. Or if there are any other items for clarification, we will reach out with a template to that party to ensure the party has the ability to ensure that its report is indeed completely received on our end. We are now especially busy with COP 4.2 preparations, as we know you are too. And so the deeper analysis of this work will actually only begin after COP, but we can certainly say that we have been very impressed with the energy that parties have been putting into the reports. If there are, and may I just say that if you have in any way any trouble, including online worries or a link hasn't arrived or anything like that at all, please simply reach out to our general email box, and we shall ensure that the correct person gets in touch with you. If it is a technical question, we'll make sure the technical person reaches you. If it is an IT question, we'll make sure that you have your link. It's really a matter of minutes that we can make it available. So please be assured that it is that we are on the receipt. We are waiting to be able to help you. So all of that we will still put our efforts into, of course, in the run-up to COP 4.2, so maybe we can even present you with a higher number when we meet in Bali in not so long time. With that, if I may just look into the room, if there is any question or area for need of clarification, and if there isn't right now, please be assured that you could reach us by email. You could reach out to us, and as mentioned before, of course, even this PowerPoint will be uploaded and will be made available to all of you that have attended, and even those that might not have been able to come, we make it available in case it is helpful to your preparation. Yes, and let me just, I see there is a question by one party who has not received the link, so we are literally looking right this moment, and we'll have a look if, it is sent. Let me just explain this part, that this link is sent always to the national focal point of the party, because it is either she or he, or it is through him or her that the report would be forwarded and submitted formally to the Secretariat. And this is part of ensuring that the party can be sure that it really has the information submitted to us that it would like to have seen reported on its behalf. And here and there might be a change in national focal point. If that has happened to you, and that's perhaps one of the reasons why your report hasn't reached us yet, simply be in touch with us as soon as you can so that we can send you the details of updating the national focal point, and so that you can ensure to be able to report. Let me also just add two more information pieces. This is, of course, now looking forward to the remainder of the full reports coming in. The one is that if the national focal point is being supported in her or his role to fill in the details in the online reporting tool, it is possible to add an additional officer to that access, to those access credentials, to ensure that the national focal point is supported as need be, to ensure the national reports are handed in the way the party would like it to be done. So if you need that extra officer to be indicated, simply indicate that to us and we can make that an easy technical fix. And I think I have, oh, I see there may be another question. Yes, so once the, thank you very much for the question also on knowing what happens to your your report. So once we have completed the completeness checking of the report, and can see from our side that everything appears to be correctly filled in and completely filled in, we have a formal communication that ensures that both the copy that we have on our side and also you as a party have is indeed the final copy of your report. And so you will be receiving an official notification by email, both that would include a PDF version of your finalized report. The step that I didn't yet explain is that once reports are considered final by the party, and with the support of the Secretariat as needed, at some point, at a particular date, we will be able to upload all of those reports to the website, like we have also uploaded all short reports. And before that upload happens, we verify that the party is happy with and content that this is really its final report. So this will happen in a little bit of time still, so please wait a little bit on that while we just give enough time to parties to ensure, number one, that their reports are in, but also number two, that the reports are as complete as possible. I hope I have addressed your questions. Should there be anything else, simply reach out to us. And otherwise, we hope that you may join us tomorrow when we do a deep dive on another set of another agenda item before the COP, namely that of financial mechanism. If you haven't registered yet, please join us. But in the meantime, stay well. And on behalf of the entire Secretariat, thank you for your time to join us. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Bye-bye.